Good morning. My name is Mark Zuckerman. I am the president of the Century Foundation, and I want to welcome you to Paying for Progress, co-sponsored by the Bernard Schwartz Rediscovering Government Initiative at the Century Foundation and Larry Michel and the Economic Policy Institute. Thank you. I also want to thank the team that organized this event, including Jffe Madrick, Mike McCormick, Andy Stetner, Lucy Muirhead, Alex Kiselewski, Simon Glenn Gregg, Dan Crawford, Christian Dorsey, Liz Rose, for all their work in setting up this great event. First, I want to make an apology. When we started planning this event in July and August, it was frankly inconceivable, unforeseeable, unimaginable, as we came into early November, that the Chicago Cubs would be the presiding world champions. Jeff, we just missed that, sorry. Some of you may have seen a recent headline of a so-called genius high schooler who in his 2003 school yearbook predicted the Cubs would win the 2016 World Series. Did y'all see that? Well, the Century Foundation, being the premier research institution that we are, carefully examined a digital copy of this yearbook, and I can report exclusively to you today that while this young man did in fact predict the 2003 that the Cubs would win the World Series this year, that same page failed to make any mention whatsoever of Donald Trump winning the 2016 presidential election. Now that would have been genius. Today we have an amazing lineup of policy experts, and I'm so much looking forward to hearing from the presentations today. Bottom line, regardless of the political trends in Washington, it is always the right time to promote shared prosperity and fund powerful investments in our economy. And I want to thank all the panelists and guests for coming today and participating. Finally, as a 97-year-old think tank that promotes equality, economic opportunity, and inclusiveness, we condemn these continued acts of intolerance, including additional examples reported just this morning in the Washington Post. As a positive note, I find it profoundly uplifting that many high school students across the country are taking action against intolerance through peaceful protests around the country. With that, I want to welcome Jffe Madrick, our director of the Bernard Schwartz Rediscovering Initiative. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mark, and thanks again to all those people he mentioned. To remind you, Congressman Levin is coming in around noon to discuss his policy reform proposals. I think they'll center around corporate taxes. My main thank you is to all of you for coming. Mark mentioned the many people involved with setting this up, and obviously I thank them. As well, this has been quite a week. Obviously, when we set this up, we did not anticipate what a tumultuous week indeed it is, and tumultuous congressional sessions are going on right now. But let me say this, and to reiterate partly what Mark has already said, there will be a government, there is an agenda for us to tackle. Let me repeat that. There is an important agenda for all of us to attend to, no matter who is president. I guess we know who is president, though some of us can't find his phone number yet. And we're going to move forward. This conference is about a big part of that forward agenda. Let me emphasize one lesson we learned from this election, and I see the economists are finally catching up to it. There was a report from Goldman Sachs this morning, the economics department, not the investment banking department. What we learned on election night, or I should say the next day, is that investors are open to fiscal stimulus. A few months before, the Republicans, enamored of austerity, the cloud of austerity, talked about cutting the budget deficit, which would have dampened economic growth. The next morning, now most of you were probably watching TV and saw the Dow Jones Industrial Futures falling by 600, then 800, then up to 900 points. It looked like calamity. The next morning, after a shaky start, the market soared. It soared the next day again. What was the market saying? Well, a Trump tax cut, because it increases the deficit, could mean significantly more growth in this economy. That was novel. Mainstream economists did not buy that argument. Even Democratic mainstream economists were cautious. I think, personal opinion, too much influenced by the austerity environment we've been living in. Now we know we can absorb more inflation, we can absorb higher interest rates, but are tax cuts, substantial Reagan-like tax cuts, the way to go? We'll be discussing that issue today. I do want to make one more point in regard to this because I think people are missing it. Trumponomics is very akin to Reaganomics. Reaganomics, let me emphasize, did not succeed. Within 2 years, because of fears of a budget deficit, and I always don't share those fears, but fears of a budget deficit, Reagan raised taxes. And we're going to talk about tax proposals down the road because the Trump administration, the Republicans and the Democrats, may be facing the same set of pressures about deficit issues. Some of us think there are better ways to have a fiscal stimulus, serious social programs and serious public investment. Bipartisan support for an infrastructure program may well make sense. One last point about Reaganomics, it was the beginning of the age of inequality, the beginning of stagnating wages. In the 1980s, corporate investment, despite all that deregulation, was tepid. Productivity grew slowly, very slowly by historical terms. As I say, it was a failure. The Trump economic program, in my view, but we will discuss this, and I hope we'll be open to other ideas, may lead us down the same road. The one advantage Reagan had was it was an environment where he had a severe recession out of which he could shoot in a V line straight up, at least temporarily. We're going to discuss a lot of issues. The hot button issue, we thought, and I think it still will be, is international corporate reform. Deferrals, repatriation, and do we lower the business tax rate? Donald Trump has a proposal for that. We have a panel dedicated to that issue, our second panel. The first panel will be dedicated to fiscal expansion, progressive taxes, and some other issues like I think we're doing in that panel, we're going to be doing something about tax expenditures, something important about tax expenditures. In our third panel, we're going to be talking about a variety of taxes that are good goods. They do social good and they raise revenue. And we think that agenda is rapidly going to be in demand as we start to deal with what may well be a Trump deficit. There does seem to be political agreement to cut taxes, probably not quite as sharply as the Trump tax cuts. We know they are severe. We know they favor the rich significantly. One number, the top 0.1 or 1% will get a 14% tax cut. The middle American will get a 2% tax cut, and poorer Americans will get a 1% tax cut, about $100 compared to a few million bucks for the very top. That seems to many people to be unfair. We'll let all of you decide.